Welcome back to the Stupid Fans Club. I am your host, Shaan Donn, and welcome to the club. We are talking all things college football here. So if you are not subscribed, please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube and follow us on TikTok at Stupid Fans Club, as well as our Instagram, which is under construction at the moment. But we will be posting clips from the shows there as well. We are here to talk about week 14, the final week of the regular season. We're going to talk about the must see TV games. If you've been watching, you know that I usually do those at the end of the show and talk about some of the previews there. But with this being the last week of the season and so many potential scenarios and these games having so much impact on where teams end up, there were too many to talk about. So I knew we would need to do a whole separate thing, which I actually like a little more because now I can go in depth more about the previews and what to expect in these games. So big matchups here. We're going to go through them, the must-see TV games this weekend. The games you gotta make sure you're in front of your TV for. We're going to start with Michigan at Ohio State. Folks, this should not be a must-see TV game here. Ohio State is in the playoff. Even if they didn't want to be, they're in it. And a Michigan loss would probably drop their seeding, but it wouldn't impact anything. But for some reason, you're wondering if somehow Ohio State loses this game, will Ryan Day still have a job? Like the way that the state of Ohio is pressing on this game and how important it is for them to beat Michigan for all intents and purposes, a meaningless game. This is pretty heavy after a heavy week with the big matchup against Indiana. So this will be very, very interesting. It's going to be an emotional game. Ohio State will need to stay within themselves and just play their game. Come out and know that you're the better team. Play aggressive. Assert your dominance early. Don't let a team like Michigan hang around. Put them away like you did with Indiana and go enjoy your postseason. If you're Ohio State, you want to show them early. Like this isn't going to be one of those. All right. So it's going to be a good matchup. It is at Ohio State this year. The question for Michigan will be, can they force their game plan onto Ohio State? Can they make this a phone booth football game where it's just, we're going to play you very, very well defensively. We're not going to let you get anything on that front. And we're going to run the football on you. And you're not going to be able to stop it. Like, it's going to be interesting to see who can enforce their will. If Michigan can enforce their will, they're in any game. Like, they've won games. They're a bowl eligible team. As shaky as they've been at quarterback here and the problems that they've had offensively in the passing game, it's like they've found a way to win games and hang around and pretty much maximize what they had this season. And man, what better way? I mean, this would be bigger than whatever bowl game they make it to. Like this is their championship. So they would love nothing more than to hand Ohio State another loss at the end of the season. Ohio State has to make sure they're not out physical. I felt like that was one of the things that surprised me when they played Oregon. Oregon just felt like they had a little more dog to them in that game. And, you're starting to see, that's when you start to see their DBs get exposed and just big plays. They kept giving up Denzel Burke and Igbenogson. And, it was just shocking. So you want to make sure, again, Michigan wants to be dirty and physical and make it not dirty as in dirty play, but just make it a real physical phone booth, no space, just all in your face type of game. Ohio State, you are better than them this year. If this was any other team, you may be resting people. Like it's just not in the realm of this season. This game means very little, and you're focused on a playoff here. But due to the history of this being a rivalry game and how Michigan won the national championship last year and how they've beaten you all, what, 3 times in a row, like this is going to be bigger than that. And in those rivalry games, that's why I think it's so important for Ohio State to stay within themselves, because those rivalry games just can get out of hand. And, players may start losing their cool. It's going to be a lot of jawing back and forth. And teams sometimes play outside of themselves, where the team that you expect to get their face beat in, they're just doing stuff you haven't seen them do all year. It's like, but it's the energy and adrenaline they get from playing in a game like this with this much history and this much hostility from fans. Oh man, I'm so excited about this game already. It's going to be an incredible watch. But yeah, it's going to come down to who can assert their dominance. Ohio State should do that. But again, this is a rivalry game, and who knows how this will play out. But going to be a good matchup there. Next, we have Texas at Texas A&M. That is huge because this has everything you want. It's an in-state rival. It's in Texas, like pretty much the capital of just college football or youth football, high school football, all that stuff. But this is so many different things here. Like, I think this is going to be really, really tough for Texas. This is going to be a night game against your in-state rival, and it happens to be one of the toughest, if not the toughest place to play in college football. And oh yeah, the SEC championship is on the line here. This is like, wow. Like, I've been looking at this game for a long time, and it felt like it would never get here for Texas, but this is a huge test. Like, to end the season against Texas A&M, who's coming off of a heartbreaking quadruple overtime loss to Auburn. Oh my goodness, but they still have a chance to make the SEC championship. They are going to throw everything at Texas. It's going to be a hostile environment. And man, oh man, when you look at how Texas has been playing recently versus how they looked at the beginning of the season, I don't think you can say that Texas has been playing their best ball towards the end of the season, which is when you want to be playing it. They looked great coming out the gate. They looked flawless until they met Georgia. And now they've been winning, which is good. They're still a great football team, but they haven't looked like invincible like they were in the beginning of the season. And you're going up against Texas A&M. Whew. And it's a rivalry game because it's like it's already tough just playing Texas A&M, but then you add the rivalry factor into it and that environment, and it's at night. Oh my goodness! Oh, they can't wait to rush the field. It would just be absolutely incredible. Me as a Georgia fan, I want to play Texas A&M not because they're the easier team, even though on paper they may be. Uh, I hate when you beat somebody earlier and then you got to play them again. I don't want to do that. Like, let's stay away from those revenge games and all. Like, let's just leave it alone. We played Texas once, we beat them. Let's move on. Let's play Texas A&M. I don't want to have to play Texas again. Just that added factor there in the SEC championship. Like, no, I'm good. I'm good on that. Uh, So that'll be a great matchup. That's going to be huge. And then I have surprisingly on my schedule, and I'm not saying this because this is my favorite team, but listen to me. Georgia Tech at Georgia is a must see TV game because Georgia Tech, this is as good as Georgia Tech has been in years. When they're getting ready to face Georgia, this is usually equivalent to a bye week for Georgia. This is a celebratory event for Georgia for so many years. Last year, this was not a celebratory event. This was where we finally saw Georgia Tech is kind of good. Like they've improved. They're a middle of the road team last year. This year they're 7-4 and are going to give Georgia everything they can handle. Oh yeah, and they've already beaten a top 10 team with probably the best offense in the country. Like this is going to be a scary game on top of how Georgia looked in their previous game against UMass. The score is deceiving because Georgia pulled away later on in the game, but the way that Georgia's defense looked, it was concerning. Now, when you take Georgia's season as a whole and you look at how they've responded, you can kind of piece together that Georgia plays down to their competition and they usually follow up a poor looking week defensively, especially with a sound performance against a higher uh against higher competition basically. So hopefully this is not a team that Georgia Tech or that Georgia sleeps on. And Georgia Tech, again, it should be pretty clear because they've beaten Miami already. So, you got to come out there very prepared. You can't look forward. I know you've already clinched here for the SEC championship, but you can't overlook them and think that this is going to just be the same Georgia Tech of the past. I have Georgia on upset alert. That is how serious this game is and how much of a threat I take Georgia Tech as. Like, this is an upset alert game, which could cause so much chaos. Georgia needs to come out there, take care of business. Do not let Georgia Tech hang around and give them life thinking that they can beat you, because that's been a recurring theme against inferior teams this year. And this year, you can't even consider Georgia Tech like inferior. This is just a good team that you're going to have to try to beat. So, again, you better play the team and not the brand, not the name, not what you're used to playing. This is a totally different situation here. And a lot of the things that UMass had success with last year are some of the things that Georgia Tech does better. UMass is 2-9. And this was at one point in the game was just like back and forth for a little bit. So some concerns there based off of that. But again, you look at Georgia as a whole, you hope that they stick to the script in terms of how they usually respond. Kirby usually doesn't have them come back looking terrible again. You would hope at this point in the season that would be written off and we would just show up against whoever is on our schedule. But that's not the case. So we'll see. Gonna be more interesting than I think people realize. That is a huge matchup right there. Next one is Oklahoma State at Colorado. This is a must win for Colorado. They need to make the conference championship to have a chance to play in the college football playoff. After their loss this week to Kansas, that made them out of control of their destiny. And so now they have to beat Oklahoma State, and they're going to need some help to get to the college football playoff. And, first stop would be their conference championship. So that's going to be a good one. Colorado is the much better team. Oklahoma State is not good at all. They haven't beaten a single conference team this year. They're 0-8, and this is a home game for Colorado. So Colorado, I'm sure they want to avenge their performance against Kansas. That was the worst I've seen them look on defense all year. They had no answer whatsoever for the running game there. So I think they come out and take care of business on their side and play much better. But in terms of what they need to happen to get into the conference championship, it's not impossible, but it's gonna definitely take some shockers here. So they will be rooting for themselves along with a couple of other teams to win and lose. Next, we got Notre Dame at USC. This is a watch yourself game here from Notre Dame. I have a clip from earlier this season saying USC may be the best, worst team in the country. They lost like all these close games where their record it was a point in the season where it could have been undefeated, but they already had like 2 or 3 losses. So a lot of close losses there for USC, and their season has kind of fallen apart here. But rivalry game, and Notre Dame, this is a road game to end the season. USC is much better than their record would indicate, and they're going to have to come and show up. Now, Notre Dame has done this as consistently as anybody has this year. After that Northern Illinois loss early in the season, that shocker, they've been very business oriented. They come in, take care of business, and go home. So you would expect them to do the same here to end up the season. But we'll see. Historic rivalry game. We'll see who can walk away with that W there. Then we got Miami at Syracuse. This one is huge. This has a lot of implications on the ACC championship, which SMU has confirmed and sealed their berth for that game. So this will be a must win for Miami, and it's going to be a tough one. Maybe their toughest one of the year at Syracuse. I mean, Syracuse has looked good for the majority of the year. They had a tough game against Georgia Tech, who beat Miami. Georgia Tech, or they went up big on Georgia Tech, but Georgia Tech had like a crazy comeback at the end of the game where they had an opportunity to win that game. Syracuse was able to hang on, but we've seen Miami's struggles this year, and we see the struggles on their defense, and seeing how they've escaped a lot of games. This is going to be, man, it's going to be a challenge. This is a heck of a way to have to end your season and get your conference championship berth. Obviously, with this being the last game of the regular season, and you all with Miami losing to Georgia Tech already, you don't want to get a second loss this late in the season against an unranked team, because now you're flirting with missing the playoffs altogether, being that you won't be in your conference championship. So a lot on the line here. And Syracuse is honestly better than some of the teams that gave Miami their biggest scares. So, boy, Miami better come with it, and hopefully their defense steps up. But I mentioned this earlier. You're at this point, you are who you are. Like, if your defense isn't gonna just become good overnight, Miami's defense is not good. they're just not good. And Syracuse, it's not like they're the world beaters, but they are a team capable of hanging with Miami. And man, oh man, I mean, that's as tough as it gets to end your season in a must-win game. So we'll see if Miami can pull that off. Miami and Texas have just extraordinarily tough games to end the season. So we'll see how that plays out. And wrapping it up, the final game that is a must-see TV game to end this regular season will be South Carolina at Clemson. I originally thought I had this circled because I'm like, man, that's a good matchup, but these teams aren't playing for anything. And then I was like, wait, Clemson might be playing for something. And they are. This is also a must win game here for Clemson. If Clemson wins this game, and I believe they need Miami to lose, they need a couple of teams to lose, if not just Miami. It's a couple of scenarios where they can make it in if they win. Extremely tough game for Clemson here. South Carolina is just been a wrecking ball in the SEC. They have a really good defense and a very tough offensive scheme here to stop. And I mean, boy, Clemson is going to have their hands full. That rushing attack that South Carolina has, I mean, they're just daunting to go up against. And this means a lot because it's an in-state rivalry here. And, both teams are going to come to play. They are identically ranked. I think this is an 18 and 19 matchup. So it's like, well, what do you care if you're South Carolina? This is like, you already are bowl eligible. You're not going to make the college football playoff. You're not in your conference championship. Like, what do you care? But these rivalry games mean something different in those states, man. So, and they want to finish their season off strong. Like, and what better way to than beat our in-state rival? Man, oh man. So, a lot of teams with a lot of opportunities here, but some of these roles are just, I mean, they are going to be the road less traveled. No one wants to go to Texas A&M to stamp their chance or their seed into the conference championship. Like, no one wants to go to Syracuse to end their season and play a hot team like South Carolina. I mean, it's going to be very, very tough for some of these teams, but it's going to make for some darn good football and exciting games to watch. Thinking about it, there were certain scenarios where it was like, what will be very interesting to see is what the committee does with the losers of these conference championship games, particularly those teams who come into the games with 2 losses and then get their third. It is going to be like, where do you put them? How do you punish them for making their conference championship but losing? Because, I mean, that's going to then just decimate a team and make them. I think that creates a space of, why do I make my conference championship then? Why don't I just be good enough to get in but avoid that championship and keep my spot? Lane Kiffin, who will no longer be in it, but he spoke to it not being worth trying to get that bye week at the potential of, with the potential of losing losing a spot in the playoff altogether. So I would hope the committee doesn't punish the loser. Like, at this point, once you're in, and this is all you're doing is fighting for the opportunity for a bye week here. A bye week. And if you don't, then you're gonna have to, go on the road or play the first week. You won't get a bye. But I also would entertain, potentially, with an expanded playoff, is there a need for a conference championship anymore? It can just be the NFL. You clinch the playoff berth, these teams get the bye, and these teams go on the road. Like, what? There isn't really a need for that anymore. You look at the Georgia-Texas matchup, it's like, well, we already saw it. And I mean, it's entertainment purposes, it's great, but these teams are like, why is Georgia potentially risking their third loss to depending on how the committee handles it, to potentially fall out of the playoff, because this is what happened to them last year when it was a 14 playoff where Georgia went undefeated in the regular season and then lost in the conference championship and missed the playoff. It's like, well, well, what was the point? So I would consider that. I don't know if anyone has thrown that out there, but I don't necessarily see the reason for a conference championship. And if you're going to punish teams again who have maybe get their third loss in the conference championship, it's especially no reason, because then teams are just going to avoid it. They're going to try to do whatever they can to not be eligible for it and not risk it. So very interesting, but we'll see how this all plays out. I'm so excited to get the selections, to first get through this last week to see where everybody ends up and get to the final selections to see what teams are playing what teams, who has to go on the road, who gets the buys. Oh, it's going to be so exciting this final week. But that will do it for week 14, or looking forward to week 14. And we will be back to analyze on Tuesday the college football playoff rankings. Thanks for joining us. If you're not subscribed, please make sure you subscribe. Follow us at Stupid Fans Club on TikTok and Instagram, and we'll see you soon.